do for the technological part of this. Are you seeing the title slide? Yes?
We are seeing it.
Yes, yes, we are.
Good, okay. All right, so thank you for that introduction, and thanks to all of you for being here this evening. It's a real pleasure for me to be asked to speak to you as members of the congregation where my HUC classmates served you for so many years. And I became acquainted with Rabbi Koznowski when she did a presentation, I think it was for New Cage last summer, and Rabbi Camel and I have been working on the logistics for tonight. And Barbara and I have been communicating by email for quite a long time. So we both agreed that it's nice to see each other, and Kenya as well, everybody who's working on this. I'm going to do my presentation with Google Slides, and along the way, I have a couple of things I'm going to show you that will hopefully be of local interest to you. So I'm going to ask you about that and maybe help fill me in. And then when I'm done, we'll have some time for questions and comments. By the way, I do presentations technically on about 40 different topics, and some of them are happy and positive. This topic, of course, is negative. Most of what I'm going to share with you, you could call as bad news and sad, but we have in Jewish tradition what is called the nechemta, the sense of consolation and hope at the end, the good news. So try not to get depressed about all the anti-Semitism I'm going to talk about, because there is good news coming. So it would be a legitimate question to ask, why did I pick the title, The Jew Coup? All right, well, here's why. This is Reverend Rick Wiles, the originator of the Jew Coup conspiracy theory. When he first started talking about this supposed phenomenon, he had about 100,000 Facebook followers. This all began in November of 2019, when he called the effort to impeach the former president of the United States a Jew coup. Jews were disproportionately represented among the House leaders of the impeachment, including Adam Schiff, Jerry Nadler, Jamie Raskin, and David Cicilline. I bet you wouldn't have guessed that David Cicilline is Jewish. His mother is, and he was raised as a Jew. Wiles's True News Network was favored by the former president and was given press credentials for the Davos World Economic Forum in January of last year, much to the consternation of Jewish leaders who objected to Wiles's extreme anti-Semitic views. A spokesman for the Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting in America, CAMERA, told the Jewish press that by granting credentials to True News, the administration had become part of the problem when it comes to fighting hatred toward Jews. So here's a sample of what I am sarcastically calling Wiles' greatest hits. For us as Jews, his worst quotations. In his sick anti-Semitic mind, we are potential killers, deceivers, out to control the country, linked with Satan, promoters of abortion and pornography, have our own mafia that ties the president's hands and even killed JFK, and which forces elected officials to keep quiet about Israel's nuclear capability. If Wiles were not so influential, you would think that these are statements from a crazy person. Feel free to think that anyway. Well, nobody's going to forget the Charlottesville rally. Marchers chanted, "Jews will not replace us," among other things. As you'll see here, it was supposed to be about white culture and white supremacy and defending the statue of Robert E. Lee. And what it came down to was they shouted the the familiar Nazi slogan, blood and soil, there were Jews who were in their synagogue and saw these men with rifles standing across the street. They were able to get out and remove their Torah scrolls. In 1978, as some of you may recall, a Nazi group pushed to demonstrate in Skokie, deliberately selecting an area that was densely populated by Holocaust survivors. The proposed march caused a national uproar, and the American Civil Liberties Union defended the group's First Amendment rights in court. Eventually, they ended up demonstrating in Chicago. If any of you remember that, we can talk about that later. Ted Deutsch, who's a Democrat from Florida, joined last year with Representative Elaine Luria, who's a Democrat from Virginia, as members of Congress in calling on the White House to declare that it would no longer allow True News access, just like some of the other networks. Deutsch noted that they were allowed access by the White House on the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, January the 21st, 2020. And Deutsch was then marking the anniversary in Israel. In response to what the White House did with True News, the American Jewish Committee tweeted, "There are many things True News should receive, top amongst them being derision and scorn. One thing that it should not receive is credentials from the White House. This needs to be rectified immediately." It wasn't. The two senatorial races in Georgia, as you know, made the difference in giving the Democrats control of the Senate, backed up by the vote of Vice President Harris. As I assume you know, Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff defeated Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. You may not know that Perdue's campaign produced a commercial in which Ossoff's nose was deliberately extended. While you may not be able to see the difference, professional graphic designers could, and the news about this helped Ossoff's campaign. And this is what Ossoff tweeted, calling out Senator Perdue and his campaign and referring to it as the least original anti-Semitic trope. Of course, Perdue denied it, and so did his campaign spokespeople, but it was done. This may be a familiar face to you. So, by the way, does anybody know her or know of her? Feel free to chime in now.
I do know
never
she's
heard
a
of her.
representative here in Illinois, and a little bit south of us, but yeah, I do know that she's around.
Okay. All right. So she made a comment the day before the insurrection. Hitler was right on one thing. He said, "Whoever has the youth has the future. Fill your children's minds with what is true and right and noble, and then they can overcome evil with good because they can actually discern between what is evil and what is good." She got called out for it and issued an apology, which you see here. And the Republican National Committee apologized for what she said and said, "We are confident that she has learned her lesson." Whether that's happened or not, I don't know. Maybe you know better than I do. So, of course, another day we're never going to forget, January the 6th. This photo went viral, and the man was not the only one wearing this foreboding sweatshirt. There was a question raised about whether this photo was actually taken the day of the attack on the Capitol, although it looks like it was. But I don't know about you, but to me, this sweatshirt itself is scary. He was, as you see on the right there, eventually arrested and charged with 2 federal offenses. And this was just a week later. I don't know what's happened with his case at this point. This is relatively close to you, and having gone to the University of Wisconsin in Madison, I know how close Wisconsin is to Chicago. So these are 2 judges from Wisconsin, both Jewish, who experienced anti-Semitism. And what happened was I'll tell you what happened. One commenter on Facebook said that Judge Karofsky on the left was hook-nosed and posted an anti-Semitic caricature of her after the ruling was issued. Another called her a terrorist and said she should have a massive fatal heart attack on live TV. Her colleague, Rebecca Dowlett, was called a traitor by a Facebook commenter who also warned the justice that the best case scenario for you is that you actually get a trial, a people's trial. When the people rise up, then that is what should happen. So this is similar to what Governor Whitmer in Michigan heard. These are examples of the torrent of misogynistic and anti-Semitic messages that these two Jewish judges received online in the days after they denounced and then voted to reject an attempt by the former president's lawyers to invalidate hundreds of thousands of votes in their state. The Daily Stormer, a neo-Nazi publication, which takes its name from a real Nazi Germany publication, published an article about the two judges, calling them, quote, an elite Jew sitting next to another elite Jew determining the course of our government. Both Karofsky and Dowlett declined to speak out, but a spokesman said that they were both concerned for their safety and were in touch with law enforcement. Okay, next. So here's what I regard as the queen of anti-Semitism, and talking about her Jewish space lasers theory. So this article, which appeared in the Forward in January, talks about how she implicated what she refers to as Rothschild Incorporated with starting forest fires in California using laser beams from space. We can talk about this a little bit later because the National Museum of American Jewish History in Philadelphia has come out with play lasers, sort of a takeoff on this. She accused a board member of PG&E as also being the vice chairman of Rothschild Incorporated. A couple years ago, Jews are conspiring to bring in non-white immigrants, and George Soros, whom I'm going to talk about a little bit later, in keeping with the QAnon theory, is an enemy of the people, and he's a favorite target of anti-Semites. Okay, the next one I'm going to assume you know, and I'd like to hear what you have to say. So I just became aware of this in my research. I had no idea who Ed Burke is. Found this article in the Times of Israel, and his comment here about how Jews deal with Jews to the exclusion of everybody else. The ADL has responded to him, and the mayor of Chicago has responded to him. Can anyone give any more insight or up-to-date information on this one?
I can't give you any more. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can't give you any more information, but remember that Ed Burke is Irish. My father grew up in an Irish neighborhood, and Irish will be Irish. They deal only with the Irish, unless it's for a reason for them to deal with someone else. So he's just reiterating what his own constituency does. And I have nothing more to say about that.
Okay. All right. So I think it's important when we take a look at anti-Semitism that we do a quick history lesson on it, and this is really quick. And I got it from a great website, myjewishlearning.com. So you may have heard of Augustine, put forth the ideas back in the 4th century. Jews, of course, murdered Jesus and were forever doomed to exile and subordination. But the good news is that we should be protected because we have the Old Testament, and Christians respect the Old Testament. In the New Testament, we have all of these different charges against Jews, starting with Judas, Jews being Christ killers, et cetera, et cetera. And then you may know about supersessionism, which is that the New Covenant, through the New Testament, was supposed to supersede the Old Testament, and that's why it's called the Old Testament. I will say to you that my Christian clergy friends don't call the Hebrew Bible the Old Testament anymore because they know it's a product of supersessionism. They refer to it as Hebrew Scripture or the Hebrew Bible, which is much more respectful than the Old Testament. We see what developed with all of these ideas over the next few centuries. That turned into legislation, the 6th through 11th centuries. And then one of my least favorite people in history, Pope Urban, started the Crusades nominally to liberate Christian holy sites, but along the way to kill Jewish infidels. And the Crusades went on for 200 years. You may have heard of the Fourth Lateran Council. Jews were denounced as usurers for lending money at interest, and this led to the idea that Jews are cheap and that they're trying to cheat Christians whenever possible. 1315 to 17 was the Great Famine, but it's become known more for the bubonic plague and the Black Death, which it was told was started by Jews by poisoning the wells and the springs, and that's how people died from it. And Jews somehow didn't die from it, so we were accused of that. Spain, of course, does not have a great history. Back in the mid-14th century, anti-Jewish violence started. Blood purity laws came along, the Inquisition in 1478. Crypto-Jews existed. A lot of Jews converted to Christianity, and there were Jews who practiced their Judaism quietly and secretly. They became called Marranos, which, by the way, means swine, not a complimentary term. In 1492 was the expulsion of the remaining Jews, and also, as you know, the year in which Christopher Columbus left Spain, and there are theories about that, but that's a topic for another time. The 18th century Enlightenment was good news and bad news. Jews were emancipated. We came out of the ghettos, able to come out of the shtetls, but there developed theories of racial classification, and Jews came to be known at that time, and then later on in the 19th century, as the Jewish race, a term which was used, of course, later on by the Nazis. There was a depiction of Jews throughout Europe as having values that were the opposite of most national values. And the Dreyfus Affair was the most prominent example of anti-Semitism, with a decorated officer in the French army being accused of treason and put on trial. And one of the journalists who covered his trial was a man by the name of Theodor Herzl, who was a secular Jew, secular Austrian Jew, and who had a turnaround as a result of this and started the Zionist movement. The 20th century, obviously, the Holocaust would be thought of. The protocols of the Elders of Zion may not be so well known, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So, where does the word anti-Semitism come from? Technically, well, before I tell you about Wilhelm Marr, it was part of a response to the so-called Jewish question: what to do with Jews in Europe who had gained power. Because in the past, they were looked down upon. They couldn't get into certain professions or schools or whatever it may be. They had become political leaders, bankers, leaders of industry, army officers, and bosses. And so the people who they sort of leapfrogged over didn't like this. So the Jewish question was, what do we do about these Jews? There was a lot of fear, and the fear was exploited. So Wilhelm Marr started the Anti-Semites League, picking up on medieval Jew hatred and the bigotry that was implicit in that. And he thought that past Jew hatred was lazy, that people just hated Jews, but they didn't do anything about it. So he thought that the views of what he called anti-Semitism should become a part of society. And you see all these different parts of society, that they should be prominent, that they should be believed, that people should be convinced. And what they should be convinced of is that white Christians were superior to all those Oriental people. Now, when they used the term Oriental, it included the Middle East and specifically Arabs and Jews. So here's where it gets illogical. Semitism is bad. A Semite is bad. You don't want to be a Semite. Placing anti and a hyphen in front of a word typically results in its opposite. So anti-Semitism, it's not just a matter of being against people that are that way, or who come from a certain country. It really conveys something that is different. So Deborah Lipstadt has said the hyphen completely distorts the meaning of the word, and we'll get to her much later. So one of the big things that's happened in the 21st century is a definition of anti-Semitism, and it comes from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IHRA. And I'm gonna share with you some of the major points about it. So who defines what anti-Semitism is? We as Jews can define it, as we saw in the examples I showed you already. I mean, you would probably agree with me that all of those are examples of anti-Semitism. Yeah. For me, it's a sort of feeling that I know it when I see it, or hear it, or feel it. Sociologists or anthropologists or judges could define it according to theories or laws, but in recent years, this organization has gathered together, and you can see in the top paragraph, to strengthen, advance, and promote Holocaust education, and to combat growing Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism. So they started in the year 2000. It was started by former Swedish Prime Minister, and there were 46 governments that were represented there. Since that time, here is the list, and obviously I bold-faced Israel and the United States. And I didn't hear about this until within the last year or so. So what happens is delegations are chosen in each country. They're chaired by ambassadors or senior governmental officials. Non-governmental organizations, NGOs, can be part of delegation. The IHRA only accepts countries commonly seen as democracies, not those with authoritarian, dictatorial, or totalitarian regimes. However, other countries can be observers, as you see it at the bottom here. And you may have noticed on your calendar within the last several years that World Holocaust Memorial Day appears on January 27th. That was established by the IHRA. And one of the things they say is that every country that's a member has to observe that holiday, and it should be promoted by the government and by as many agencies and departments as possible. Oops, too far. So when I did my research for this presentation, I was curious to find out who represented the United States. So here is the list with a diverse and, in my opinion, well-qualified membership. But I'm wondering if anybody has heard of any of these people. Are there any familiar names here?
Mark Weitzman.
Okay. How do you know of him?
From the Simon Wiesenthal Center. I know we've done some programs with them.
Okay, great. Okay. I mean, look at who they represent. These are great organizations or universities or whatever it may be. So anyway, so now we know who they are. So here's their definition of anti-Semitism. a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews, rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. Okay, so there have been articles about this in the Jewish press, and the working definition, which is what this is referred to, has gained a lot of interest in the Jewish community. And there are some organizations that agree with everything that is said here, and others that are not so sure. So just to pick out some of them, targeting of the state of Israel, which is one of the controversial aspects of the definition. Killing or harming of Jews, that one's reasonable. Stereotypical allegations about Jews, like the one that the Chicago alderman said. Jews as a people being responsible for what a single Jew has done. That's something that I've heard of before. Denying the fact of the Holocaust, accusing Jews of being more loyal to Israel than to their own nation. The very existence of Israel is racist. Comparing Israeli policy to the Nazis, and holding all Jews responsible for actions of the state of Israel. They mentioned that anti-Semitic acts are by definition criminal when defined by law. Anti-Semitic when the targets of attacks obviously are Jewish or are linked to Jews. And discrimination is when Jews are denied opportunities that are available to others. Okay, so if we're going to talk about anti-Semitism, it's important to talk about their vocabulary. And this is put forth by the American Jewish Committee, which along with the ADL does great work in regards to anti-Semitism. So the AJC has been fighting anti-Semitism since its founding in 1906. And I think it's important to take a look at these very briefly, just to sort of glide through them. And these are about half of the definitions that they provide. The blood libel goes back, as you can see, to the Middle Ages. There was a charge that Jews murdered non-Jews, especially children, Christian children, to use their blood to make matzah. This is part of the bad news of this presentation. A cabal, a secret group that is in control of the world order, and ironically, it comes from the word Kabbalah. Jews as clannish, only doing business with their own kind, we heard that before. We're part of a cosmopolitan elite, which is a Stalinist term. Jews, and especially liberals, control America and are unpatriotic and disloyal. One of the most hateful ones is referring to Jews as creatures. And the Nazis used the term vermin that needed to be exterminated. And Louis Farrakhan has referred to Jews very often as termites. Dual loyalty, talked about before, so I'm not going to go over that again. This is one that I wasn't aware of until one of my younger associates pointed out to me. Echo, an online symbol which indicates for anti-Semites that someone is Jewish and that they deserve to be targeted. Globalists or globalism, we've heard certainly over the last several years that Jews are part of an international elite and that all we care about is destroying Western society. To Jew someone down, to haggle with them or bargain for a cheaper price. So I'm going to inject here a personal experience very quickly. I was on vacation in San Diego a number of years ago, and the plan was to go across the border to the shops down there, and I had been told that you can go there and bargain with the people who are trying to sell things. So I went to the hotel desk and asked the person at the desk if she could give me any tips on that. And she said, yeah, that's what the custom is. They'll really be insulted if you don't bargain with them. And she said, what you really need to do is you need to Jew them down. And I said, what? because I'd never heard the term before. She said, yeah, Jew them down, get them to be cheap like Jews are. So I said, well, I should really be good at that because I'm Jewish. And she turned a little bit red. And then I said, and I should be one of the best at that because I'm a rabbi. And then she turned crimson and apologized. Not too profusely, but apologized. So that was my experience with Jewing down. The protocols of the Elders of Zion became distributed in the early 20th century. The secret police, the predecessor to the KGB, produced them. Jews are out to dominate the world. And if you've heard of them, you may know that they were promoted and distributed in this country by none other than Henry Ford. QAnon, I figure everybody's heard about, and their point of view, particular sick point of view, is right there. The Rothschilds, you may know of, covering a couple of hundred years. They were a very successful family that sort of spread out over Europe. And the success of the Rothschilds was picked on by Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister. And so now we hear it from Marjorie Taylor Greene and other anti-Semites. Jews have also been accused of being involved in the slave trade in this country, which has created problems with some in the Black Lives Matter movement. George Soros, I referred to before, a billionaire, liberal, very much involved in tzedakah and supporting organizations that anti-Semites hate. I'd never heard of this before, a Zio. So God forbid someone who says something anti-Semitic should be regarded as being anti-Semitic. They'll say, I'm not against Jews. I'm only against Zios and the state of Israel. So that's how good that got there. And then we have the ZOG, and this is a reference to the Zionist occupation of the government of the United States, that even with the predecessor to Joe Biden, that the Zionists were still dominating the government of the United States. Even if not the presidency, take a look at Congress and those Jews that were involved in what they were involved in. Okay, so a little bit about the World Jewish Congress. So the World Jewish Congress describes itself as the international organization that represents Jewish communities in about 100 countries around the world, and they interact with governments and international organizations and people of all faiths. And so what I want you to see here is that some of the things that have been happening around the world. And just note, this is just from December. And some of the things that are happening in other countries are the same things that happen in our country. Some of the charges here that are levied against Jews, or funding of firearms, the term cancer being used to apply to Jews, cartoons, anti-Semitic tweets, Jews are ruining Germany. And then this one down at the bottom, which I used to hear from anti-Semites when I was a kid growing up in Kansas City: the only good Jew is a dead Jew. All right, so the Anti-Defamation League was founded in 1913. In August of that year, Leo Frank was convicted of murdering Mary Fagan, a 13-year-old employee of the Atlanta pencil factory that Frank managed. 2 months after his death sentence was commuted by Georgia's governor in June of 1915, a mob stormed the prison where he was being held and lynched him. And he became the only known Jew lynched in American history. So the ADL does an audit every year of anti-Semitic incidents. And so again, I just want to point out some of what is on here. The incidents remain at a really high level. There was an all-time high in 2019, but 2020 was the third highest year for anti-Semitic incidents since the ADL began tracking data in 1979. And one of the things I want to point out down here, which I'm going to talk a little bit about later, is that we have been blamed for spreading COVID. It's not just people from China with the China virus or Orientals in general. Jews have been blamed for it. And there's also been an increase in incidents of Zoom bombing, which I'm going to focus on just for one slide a little bit later on.
I do think Asian American is the more appropriate term.
Yes, sorry. Thank you.
Oh, no.
Thank you. Okay, so harassment incidents, I'm not going to do with all the numbers here. Harassment incidents increased by 10%. Vandalism, I guess this is good news, decreased by 18%. Assault decreased, look at that. So that is relative good news. There were no anti-Semitic fatalities. So did your synagogue have an incident with swastikas?
There was an incident, but that was actually before I got here. So if someone that was here wants to tell about it, that's when that happened. That might be
Okay.
might be good.
Does anybody remember that?
Yes, there was an incident where a deranged man carved a Nazi swastika on part of our building. He was captured. Police got him.
He also broke a number of windows.
Oh, yes, that's right, Barbara. Yeah.
Okay. And when that happened, was the swastika removed before there was media there or anything?
No, I don't think so.
I don't remember if it was removed or not, but I can say that there was a huge outpouring of support for us from the wider community around us. General community, the Christian community of various denominations.
And the Muslim community.
And the Islamic community as well. We had a huge service.
Good.
Right.
Okay, that
Yes.
was what I was hoping you were going to say. The reason I asked about if the swastika was removed is that when we've had incidents around here, and it happens, the swastika is not removed right away because there is an interest in basically in publicizing what has happened and not to pretend that it didn't happen. So that's why I asked about that.
Right.
And go ahead.
No, I was
Okay.
just going to say, right. I believe that the photos, the initial photos did show the carvings that were on the door.
Okay. And did it happen when there was nobody in the building?
We had only staff. We did have some staff in the building, but there were no congregants in the building.
Okay. Was it during the daytime?
Yes.
That's bold. That's pretty unusual for swastika painters.
Sorry.
Okay.
He was mentally unstable.
Yeah, he was mentally unstable. It was determined later.
Okay.
Saturday, they left. So 5 days. She didn't leave till Monday afternoon.
And was there an increase in security in any way after this incident?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And how was it increased?
We started to have a police presence actually ever since then, at our services and other events where a number of people are going to be coming. religious school. Doors were locked. I don't know that we were actually locking our doors prior to that. Ken, do you remember? Or anybody?
She asked.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember, but our police presence was all external to the building, not inside of the building.
Right, but
Okay.
it was there, and it was
Yeah.
definitely increased. Yeah.
Okay. And did you have cameras installed?
Yes.
Did we have more cameras installed after that?
We started to we had passwords to get numbers to get into the building. We had, people had to buzz the door to be let in, had to identify themselves. The people in the office who could see them on camera. There's a computer screen in our office that shows all over the building. You could see in different parts of the building. So see if anybody is there that's not supposed to be there. Yeah, there's been
Okay.
quite a uptick in security.
Good.
And
That's
and we're in the process of looking for a grant to upgrade that security markedly.
good. Okay.
Right.
That's good. Because not all congregations want to do that. And I mean, I can speak about my own congregation in Stony Brook. We have a menorah outside that got damaged in an anti-Semitic way, if you can put it that way. And so after that, we had security for the high holy days with guards carrying concealed weapons and dressed in plain clothes. The police would pay more attention to the temple than before. With the doors became locked and people had to be buzzed in.
Mhm.
But the only thing that we had was the receptionist sitting in the office could see where people were going to enter the building, but that was it. She could let them in, and that was it. And then the door was unlocked when it was time for services and time for school. So, and they didn't want to spend the money on cameras. Luckily, there haven't been any incidents since then, but okay.
Well, there was a lot of discussion at the time. Some people didn't want to, make it seem intimidating for people. And then there were other people who felt that it was more important to have the security to make people feel comfortable being in the building, walking across the parking lot, that kind of thing. So there was definitely discussion, but it went in the way of upping security quite a bit.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good. Good for you. Okay, so this next slide talks about the 47 states and DC. Unfortunately, look at which one has the most, but it may be because we have the most Jews. Then incidents at synagogues, JCCs, and Jewish schools, an increase in 2020. Anti-Semitic incidents. Okay, and then references to Israel or Zionism. So about the same. Okay, now, as horrible as anti-Semitism is, in some ways, ignorance is a close second. And I came across this article. I'm a member of the American Society for Yad Vashem. So I get their bi-monthly newspaper. And I came across this article just last week about this survey that had been done. And two-thirds of millennials and Gen Zers don't know that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. And almost half can't name a single concentration camp. 15% thought that holding neo-Nazi views was acceptable. That makes me shudder, and which is addressed a little bit later on. And then there's this at the bottom here. When the survey was done, nearly 20% incorrectly believed that Jews caused the Holocaust. Talk about blaming the victim. Okay, just one slide about going online, because we know all of the issues just about going online in general and the potential dangers that exist there, not just for children, but for adults as well. So how do people respond to anti-Semitism online? They just stop going online. I know people who have done that, or they decrease the amount of time they're online, or they just kind of like do things a little bit differently than before. You also see here that 18% actually contact the technology platform to ask for help or to report harassing content. And that's unfortunate because it's such a small number. It may be because they don't have faith in the technology platforms, which is, I think, an important thing that needs to be fixed somehow, some way. And then there are these gigantic percentages that think that the government should strengthen the laws about online access and what goes there, and improve training for police. That would be good too. And a large percentage in the survey want companies to make it easier to report this kind of content and behavior. Oops, oh, we're coming to what can we do. So Michael Gerson is a columnist for the Washington Post. And so in this first half of what he wrote, January 9th, notice the title at the top there, he talks about anti-Semitism as blaming the other, and that non-Jews, and this happened when I went through that historical piece of this presentation, non-Jews who are dissatisfied with their lives or what's happening in their country, who can be convinced to blame it on the Jews, will do that. And I mean, it's not just us who are the other, although we've been the other so many times. We are joined as the other with other people now, and minorities have been the subject of terrible assaults and things online and everything. I mean, here in New York, it seems like every night when my wife and I, before we go to bed, we watch the news, which may be a mistake, but when we watch the news, there's something about a bias crime that has taken place, and it's certainly not getting any better. Notice his statement at the bottom here that I bold-faced. The United States has a variety of leaders who provide permission for prejudice, and that certainly is the case as far as I'm concerned. It's better. It's gotten better recently. Okay, so rounding the bend and heading for home. What can we do? So this is my kind of the idea of what can't we do? Because the second part is what should we do? So what can we do? We can Schreigewalt, which I regard as the Yiddish equivalent of the sky is falling. Things are terrible. I don't like my life. I don't like the way that things are going. And just complain and complain and complain and talk about how terrible things are, but not do anything to make it better. Jews can go to the extent of denying or hiding their Jewish identity. And we know of people who who used to wear a kippah in public who won't do it anymore. People who have jewelry that is just with distinctive Jewish signs like a Star of David who won't do that anymore. I know of people who they don't want to identify with the Jewish community at all. Okay, now this one is kind of tongue-in-cheek. You can move to one of the 3 states where there were no anti-Semitic incidents last year. Hawaii, that sounds pretty good. North Dakota or Wyoming, you might want to think about that. Or where there was 1 incident in South Dakota. I had a friend who did that, by the way. Or 2 incidents or 3. And by the way, I mentioned that I'm from Kansas City, Missouri. I'm kind of proud that there were only 3 anti-Semitic incidents, but still not so great. You could move out of states with multiple incidents. So you see where Illinois fits in, kind of in the middle. And I have no plans right now, at least, to move out of New York, even though there are so many. You could move to Israel, where, of course, again, tongue-in-cheek, there is no anti-Semitism, but there are a lot of issues that Israeli Jews have to deal with, not just the existence of their country and how they deal with their neighbors, but also how they deal with each other. And I can say as a Reform Jew that there are issues that the Reform/progressive/conservative movement in Israel have to deal with. You could believe that you will never experience anti-Semitism. Good luck with that. You could think that what is really anti-Semitic, or what other people would define as anti-Semitic, is not really anti-Semitic. He didn't know what he was saying. She's not really an anti-Semite. She was just kidding, although she says it over and over and over again. And say nothing when you should say something. That is something that you can do. You can do nothing. So Gerson, I've quoted again, and I'm just highlighting what he's saying here. And this is something that the reason I asked you about what happened with your congregation is because I was hoping that you were going to say that there was a community response, and there was. So this is exactly what he talks about. We experienced here too the same thing when our synagogues get attacked, and when the Islamic Center near us got threatened, we went and had a special service there, and we formed a human chain around the outside of the mosque. And when we had problems at the temple, they were here for us. So that's really important. And it's all based on what Gerson says. I think tolerance is not the right word, but mutual respect and basic decency. And to some people, they come naturally, but to other people, they do have to be taught.
Rabbi Karol, if I could say, I think I very much agree with what you're saying, and some of the things that we've heard in our with our own incidents in our congregation. The best response was actually to join up with other groups that might be marginalized, and even in instances where there might be someone who might be anti-Semitic, to not turn it back on to their own group. Or whatever it is that they might identify as, but to make sure to try and be as empathetic and as possible, so that we're not perpetuating any sort of the harm as well.
Right. Okay. Good. So you may have heard of Barry Weiss, or you may have read her book, How to Fight Anti-Semitism. By the way, she is from Pittsburgh, which is why she talks about the Pittsburgh principle. And when in October of 2018, the 11 people were killed, that was her home synagogue where that happened. And the Pittsburgh principle is what you talked about that happened to you, that members of other synagogues and churches and mosques banded together and basically said, we are one. When I referred to before about hiding a kippah or hiding jewelry, that's what she's talking about here. Apply the kippah or Magen David test, that you're not gonna hide it. Some positive things: praise those who do the right thing. Stop blaming yourself. This is victimology. There are some people that I know who have said, when there's an anti-Semitic incident, people have said to me, well, what do you expect? We're out there, and we're out there too much for people. We should just be quiet and not be so prominent, and blame the victim, blaming the victim. This one, fight for first and foremost as Americans, is really an emphasis on the idea that most Jewish values and American values are identical, and that we are Jews and Americans. I remember when I was growing up, there would be questions that would be asked, which I thought were theoretical questions. Are you an American Jew or a Jewish American? That question stopped being asked, and for whatever reason. And we're both, and we're members of more than one community. Building a community, you are not alone. That's important. Nurture your Jewish identity in positive ways, which Lipstadt is going to talk about in the next one. Tell your story. People need to hear each other's stories. That's why I wanted to hear from you what your experience was and why I've shared with you about my experience. So Deborah Lipstadt is professor of modern Jewish history and Holocaust studies at Emory University in Atlanta. And in this, her most recent book, she carefully analyzes anti-Semitism and urges a really confident reaction to it, as well as a positive and empowering attitude about being Jewish in our country. And she has such a way with words, which I've highlighted here, that anti-Semitism is like a fire set by an arsonist. And I think that that's really on target. And that Jews should be realistic, not darkly pessimistic or being a cockeyed optimist. We have to deal with the situations we encounter as they are and work together. And that we should do positive things to encourage that we contribute to a vibrant Jewish future. We have a vibrant present. We should also have a vibrant future. Okay, so what should we do? I put in some local contacts here, which you may be aware of already or not, both the ADL and the AJC. I kind of think, based on what you've told me so far, that I'm preaching to the choir, so to speak, with the three in the green print there. Hopefully you have good contacts with your political leaders and that they are not merely sympathetic, but empathetic to what you experience. If you don't want to get so involved, you can always donate to any of these organizations that are listed here and feel that you're literally contributing to the good work that they do. I think it's also important to talk to our children and grandchildren, and not to scare them, but to help them understand the world and how we respond to it and how we see it. And then there are already programs that exist, both with ADL and with AJC. Maybe you know about this Access Chicago initiative. I simply found it on their website and read about it, and it looks like a great program. So I'm going to end with this, and I apologize to all of the Bears fans tonight, or any other NFL teams that you like, but Julian Edelman, who just retired from the Patriots, you can boo now if you'd like to boo the Patriots, has been my favorite NFL player for a long time. And he's become a committed Jew in recent years, and he has been using his celebrity for good. So the quotation from him at the top is very idealistic, but he's doing what he can to make this happen. So Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver Deshaun Jackson last summer used some anti-Semitic slurs on Twitter, and then I think it was Twitter, maybe it was Instagram, and later apologized for some clearly anti-Semitic Instagram posts, one of which included about a quote about the Jews, and he used a quotation from Hitler. He later said that it had been misinterpreted and that he got it out of context, but in a different post, he shared a paragraph which referenced a Jewish plan to extort America and achieve world domination. So Edelman's response to it was to say, let's get together. he offered to go with Jackson to the Holocaust Museum and to the African American Museum in DC. Unfortunately, they both got closed because of COVID, but I know a little bit about Edelman, and his invitation still stands, and he plans to follow through. On the right, this one is 2 months ago. You may not have heard of Myers Leonard. I had never heard of Myers Leonard either, but he was suspended for a week from the Miami Heat pro basketball team and fined $50,000 for saying an anti-Semitic slur while he was streaming himself playing a game on Twitch. If anybody knows that, feel free to educate me in a couple of minutes. He received an indefinite suspension from his team. The NBA suspended him for a week. Then he was traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder in late March, and then he was waived by the Thunder. And though he claimed he didn't know what the word that he used meant, Edelman's response is this kind of ignorance is even more dangerous. And I find Edelman's approach to be assertive, proud, and positive, and I think it's a model for responding to anti-Semitism. Okay. Anything you would like to share?
Yes, I would like to add something. So I have a special place in my heart for Dr. Lipstadt. She was an adjunct professor at the college that I attended, Occidental College, which is near Pasadena, California. And I remember in particular one time where she spoke to the Hillel students about the Jewish American princess trope. And, you know, I have not heard much about that. I don't hear much anymore. I don't know if that's something that you can speak about.
About the Jewish American princess trope?
Right. I haven't heard much about it in, you know, recent years.
Yeah, I haven't either. I mean, when I was growing up, I think I'm older than you. When I was growing up, I would hear about it way too often and hear it applied to people that I felt didn't deserve it. And I mean, you talk about stereotypes. But no, I haven't heard a lot about that recently. I think if anti-Semites are going to say something that is similar to that, without me going into the details of what it means, they tend to apply it to all Jews, and they don't specify by gender. So no, I haven't heard about that recently. Jack put a question in here. Do you see the JDL having a role in combating anti-Semitism? So Jack, I'm going to ask you, before I answer that, do you see the JDL? Oh, you're almost unmuted. You're still muted. I see your lips moving, but you're still muted. There you go.
There, okay. I'm originally from New York, where Maya Kahani and the JDL really, gained this prominence. They haven't done much over the last 20 years or so. I was just wondering if they still are active, and if so, do they have a role to play?
So I've been in New York 19 years, and I've hardly heard or seen anything of the JDL. I live on Long Island, so they're not going to be out here very much. Mm-hmm. But on those news reports that my wife and I see about crime, and particularly happening in Crown Heights, other parts of the boroughs where a lot of Jews live, they're not there that much. And I can't remember the last time I heard about JDL. Do they have a role? I think for people who believe that Jews should be able to have a potentially scary side to them, a potentially violent side, a potentially don't mess with us or we're going to deal with you aspect to it. But I have to tell you, I haven't heard anything about them in recent years, even with some of the anti-Semitic incidents that have been happening in some of the Hasidic areas around here. They've been pretty quiet. Yeah, I
Actually, I feel it's unfortunate.
Well, I think at one point they were effective in standing up to people who wanted to intimidate Jews. And although not all Jews agreed with it or supported it, and I was within that category, they felt that they were effective, and some other people did, but they didn't win a lot of fans, to be honest with you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yep, Sherry.
So I want to thank you. This was a fantastic, very informative program. But on a personal note, I too was born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri. And I wondered, what high school did you go to?
Oh, you're the one that knows my brother, right?
Who's your
Do you
brother?
know my brother, Larry?
Did you go to Center High
Yeah.
School? So
Yeah,
did I.
went to Center. Okay,
Yeah, we should
Why-
talk offline.
okay.
You look very
Yeah.
familiar.
Yes, I went to Center High School. My brother, who's also a rabbi, went there and graduated 4 years younger than I did. No big deal. I already went to my 50th reunion.
Oh, me too.
Okay,
Okay.
we should talk.
Yes, we should talk.
Okay, that's the small Jewish world. I love it.
It really is.
I do always
Okay,
like.
Ben.
Oh,
Ben has his hand raised.
In your opinion, Rabbi, how should the school systems deal with anti-Semitic remarks that come from children? And of course, in most cases, it's a reflection of their parents' attitudes and perhaps verbal things that come out of the household.
So I think, first of all, I think that the schools should deal with it. That's the first thing, rather than just sort of shrug it off. I think the best thing to do is when a child says something like that. I mean, I think that parents should. Because my experience in the past is that it begins with children parroting what they've heard at home, and if they are confronted isn't the right word because it sounds too harsh, but
We're having a hard time hearing you, Rabbi.
okay, if is this better?
Mm-mm.
No,
No, just suddenly.
I know. Yeah. Hold on a second.
Okay.
no
We're
problem.
having a hard time.
Why'd you take that out?
Because it wasn't working.
Because it was never working.
I know.
Hold on one sec.
Try now.
Oh, there you go.
Can you hear it?
Yeah, I hear you now.
I can hear you now, just like the
All
Verizon commercial.
Exactly. Thank you.
That's my wife, Donna, who came to the rescue,
Okay.
as usual. Yeah, so I think parents should be brought in, told what their children have said, and just try to nip it in the bud. I also think that it should be part of the educational system, wherever, about having respect for people who are different than you are. So, because we're not the only ones.
Exactly.
Yes, Rabbi. Rabbi's hand is up.
Oh, so thank you. I agree. Thank you so much for this presentation. My question is about, I think in similar thinking about your story, about kind of as you said, Jewing someone down. I started off kind of doing Navy chaplaincy, and the most anti-Semitism I experienced when I was doing that. And wondering if you can speak on some of the things that, not just anti-Semitism, but of course racism as well, existing both in the military and sometimes in the police force too. Anything that either the ADL or any other organizations have said of how we can help combat that?
Well, I mean, to me, it all boils down to education and how we interact with each other. I think when anybody goes through training, like police or like the military, where they're going to be dealing with people who are different than they are, that they should be taught to respect people and to realize that we're all different in some way. We in the county in which I live have an anti-bias task force, which was set up by the county legislature, and it consists of religious leaders, legislators, and police and fire representatives, and they have a meeting every month. One of my colleagues represented us on the task force, and they talk about exactly what you're talking about. At least I think it's what you're talking about. That that we have to stop creating silos that are based on what our professions are, where we came from, what our religions are, and realize that what we have in common is that we have differences, and we should celebrate our differences rather than pick on each other because of our differences. So, I mean, I can tell you that the Anti-Bias Task Force has done a great job with that. We don't have any military representation here because, like, there's not a base on Long Island, at least not one that I know of. But it would seem to me that the military should be doing something like this. I mean, isn't the military pretty diverse?
Yes, yeah, I believe the military is pretty diverse. That this was, in some ways, this was just my own experience. So I'm not sure how large of an issue it was, but definitely things that I've heard, not just from me, of course, but from others as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a long time ago, but I went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison. So wait a minute. There's Bucky Badger right there. Okay, so
Very good.
so I went there sight unseen. Back in those days, you didn't do visits to places, but I went there because there were a lot of Jews there, and it was a liberal arts school, and it was a great place to go, and it turned out to be great. But that was the first time that I had somebody walk around me and look at the back of my head and ask me where my horns were. And so I found that I had to do some educating of my dorm mates and ask them, where they got that from and all that sort of thing. My guess is that a lot of times people just aren't exposed enough to other people that are different than they are. And they rely on what they've been told, what they've heard. And now, even worse, they rely on what the internet spits out at them. Yeah. And they get all kinds of crazy ideas from that.
And as you referred to anti-bias training a few minutes ago, it does seem that there are more institutions that are talking about having anti-bias training, or at least people are talking to them about having anti-bias training. So the hope is that this will actually take hold in our schools, in our military, in our police force, and because people just often are not aware of the implicit bias. You know, the messages we picked up growing up, and it all seemed normal to us because that's what we heard, that's what we saw. But to actually acknowledge that this is not true. These are not truths.
Yeah.
Rabbi,
Yes.
this is Marcy. I know my name's not up
I
there,
know.
but
You're not Ken.
it's Ken. I'm not Ken. I'm married to Ken.
Okay.
This is his computer, so my computer would have my name. One thing I want to say, and maybe not all of you know this, I'm an educator and I've been in public education. Illinois was the first state to require Holocaust education in all of its schools. And you may not be aware of that. And one of the main reasons for requiring, and one of the parts of the state standards, oh, Kenya, you're a teacher, so you know this, but is to teach about the humanity of humans, right? Not just to teach the history of the Holocaust, but to help people understand exactly, Barbara, what you were talking about. It is, I don't know if all the teachers teach it, and I doubt this year whether much got taught at all anywhere, but that's part of Illinois state standards for education anyway. So there's a lot of things people denigrate Illinois about, and that should not be one of them.
Do they use the ADL's World of Difference program curriculum? Are you frozen?
Yeah, I'm frozen.
Yep.
I'm frozen.
Frozen. No, I'm not frozen. She's frozen.
Yeah, it does look like it was Marcy that's frozen.
Okay. When I was in the Boston area before I moved to Long Island, we used the World of Difference curriculum in public schools in the town where we lived, and it was great, really good. Okay. Anything else? Oops. All right.
Okay.
It looks like we're done.
All right. Well, with no other questions, then I just want to interject, of course, and just thank you again for coming and speaking with us, Rabbi Karol. This has, I think, really been enlightening on anti-Semitism, the things that, of course, that we can do about it, which, of course, are very important to us as a congregation.
Yep, I agree. I agree. Well, I appreciate all of you. I feel funny saying being here, but I've gotten used to saying being here over the more than a year. I do a Tanakh study group on Sunday morning, and I say to them, I'm glad you're here. And somebody will say, well, I'm not the same here that you are.
Right.
And I'll say, well, you really are, because we are here in front of each other with each other, and that's the important thing. Thank you for asking me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so
Rabbi.
much.
Thank you.
Gave us a lot to think about. Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank
You too. Stay safe, stay well.